This week, Victoria Police released its annual crime statistics, which showed significant increases in the detection of crime and the number of people being charged. But with those increases comes an increase in workload for our judicial system. And tonight, 7:30 Victoria can reveal that the system is nearing breaking point. Holding cells are at capacity and many prisoners are unable to have their day in court because there are no vacancies in the Melbourne Custody Centre. And that means their cases are added to the backlog. The Criminal Bar Association says the judicial system is in crisis. The Police Association says it's a mess. And the Ombudsman says the situation in the cells is likely to get worse. Any day of the week, venture to Melbourne's court precinct along William Street and you'll find people waiting. Waiting for a hearing, waiting for documents, waiting for a lawyer, waiting for a magistrate. Waiting has always been part of the legal game, but judicial officers say that at the Magistrates' Court it's reached farcical proportions.
I think this is a crisis situation. I have not seen so much waste in terms of time. I've not seen so much waste in terms of people's rights. It has to be fixed.
The Melbourne Custody Centre is connected to the Magistrates' Court. Due to overcrowding, a limit has been introduced on the number of accused that can be held there. A prisoner can now only enter the custody centre when another prisoner leaves. It means accused with scheduled hearings can't even be transported to court. Their cases are then adjourned, increasing pressure on a justice system long described as being at breaking point.
It's a mess, it really is, and it's all as a consequence of a lack of proper funding.
It's a vicious cycle. I mean, the courts can only handle so many cases at any one time. If people come before them and the courts think they're unprepared to an extent that it would be unfair on them, then they will adjourn those things as a rule, and then the backlog starts to build.
With more prisoners unable to attend court, more cases are being heard via video link. Video proceedings are slower, and most courts in the Magistrates' Complex don't have video link capability. It's prompted Victoria's Criminal Bar Association to write to the Attorney-General demanding action.
We're calling on the government to have a serious look at their sentencing structure, to increase the amount of legal aid, because obviously a lot of these people would have not been in custody if they'd been represented to have bail hearings.
The letter says police cells are becoming de facto prisons.
The system that allows a government department to say we can't cope, throw it all to the police and they'll cope, is a system in crisis.
Victoria Police says the number of prisoners in police cells has increased a massive 65% since the coalition came to government.
We know that around 2 years ago we, on an average, saw about 150 prisoners in police custody at a 10 o'clock muster. In the last 6 months that number's been around 260, so it's a big increase compared to 2 years ago. We can cope easily with 150, 100, 250, 260 certainly a challenge.
Recently the numbers have peaked at 330.
There's certainly pressure in the system. We're certainly concerned at the risks. That's a reality of managing prisoners. There's always going to be risks, but at the moment the risks are heightened and we are concerned about it.
Well, it's incredibly frustrating because at least half of the prisoners in police custody at any one time have mental health issues. Others have physical health issues, others have special dietary requirements, religious dietary requirements, and our members are expected to be all of those things to all of those people. They're not trained to do any of it. They're not prison officers, they're not caterers, they're not wet nurses, they are police officers, and they're being expected, as they are always expected, to pick up the slack for other government departments, and enough's enough.
Prisoners can't be held in the same police cell for more than 14 days. As a result, they're often transported in and out of holding cells around the state, restricting their access to family and lawyers.
There's some welfare issues around that, and there's also the anxiety of someone who's being moved constantly without notice, not being told where they're being taken to, and then moved again without notice, not being told where they're being taken to. And they get quite anxious, and I think I think sometimes that leads to more offending behaviour as well, because they get quite frustrated, and so they might end up even getting more charges.
While it may come as no surprise that I'm not a member of the prisoners' lobby group, I don't think it's appropriate to keep people in those sorts of conditions. It's certainly not appropriate to expect our members to look after them, and then if somebody does do something stupid, it's our members standing at the coroner's court having the finger pointed at them for not being able to do what they've never been trained to do.
Community legal centres say the backlog of cases and the lack of legal aid funding is having the greatest impact on the most marginalised people in the system. In the last 12 months, there's been a 15% increase in the number of Aboriginal people in custody. Should the government have seen this coming?
Yes, absolutely, the state government. The minute that it started to change policy on sentencing, it should have known that this would be the likely outcome.
The Ombudsman's annual report also warned of the unacceptable risk of housing prisoners in police cells.
Despite warnings from my office for over a decade, it is clear that the state still lacks the facilities and systems to detain all its prisoners in acceptable conditions. Unless action is taken and the necessary investment is made, this issue is likely to worsen and presents an unacceptable risk for those detained and for the state as custodian.
The Criminal Bar Association describes it as a crisis. The Police Association says it's a mess. Community lawyers say you should have seen this coming. The Ombudsman says the situation's likely to worsen. What is the government doing to remedy the crisis in the courts?
The bottom line is this is about community safety. The corrections authorities, parole board, police are responding to the need to have a stronger and more effective system that will better protect the community. To bridge the gap while we're getting more prison beds constructed is a small price to pay for that, and the courts, the police, corrections are all working collaboratively to make sure that can be done and the community safety can be preserved.
Do you accept that the system is in crisis?
There is no crisis in the courts, Guy. In fact, the courts are working extremely well, extremely proactively. They're reducing waiting lists. They're introducing reforms such as the next day committal mentions in the county court. Things are moving forward rather than moving backwards.
Multiple senior judicial figures would beg to differ. They're telling me that there is a crisis, particularly in the Melbourne Magistrates Court.
Well, Guy, I'm in day-to-day contact with heads of jurisdiction as and when needed, and I can assure you that the heads of jurisdiction are working very proactively together and with the government on introducing far-reaching reforms into the court system. As you've raised before, when issues occur be it in the Magistrates Court or any other court in terms of prisoner movements, the courts, the police, corrections all recognise that this is an issue to deal with in the short term, but it's a small price to pay for the increased community safety that will be achieved by keeping dangerous offenders behind bars rather than walking free on the streets.
How long is the short term?
Well, additional prison beds are being constructed as rapidly as they can be. Additional prison beds.
Ravenhall's what, 3 years away?
Well, Ravenhall is a major new facility, but what the Corrections Minister is doing, what the government is doing, is constructing new beds in many different prison facilities across the state in order to provide for additional demand, which, as I say, is arising as a result of parole authorities and police and others moving to ensure the community is kept safe in a way that they haven't been over recent times.
Recent times is a reference to the fatal mistakes made in the parole system. But is public safety being enhanced if police have to be taken off the street?
Well, if you're missing 42 shifts per week at your local police station, you can pretty much guarantee that the standard of service and the level of service that you would expect as a rule is not being met. Now, if you multiply that by 30 or more police stations around the state, you're looking at about 1,500 odd police shifts every week where people are babysitting prisoners instead of being out on the road looking after their communities.